Section of the pelvis. We've got this model right here, which is probably the best because it has it kind of all laid out for you. Okay. We can use the diagram up here for the cross section of the pelvis. We also have those urinary models that have the urinary system on one side and then the half section that compares the male and female pelvis as well. So the gonad, the structure that's going to produce the male gamete is the testes, right? Which is kept in a sac outside of his peritoneal cavity. A curious place to keep your reproductive potential, right? Just kind of out there waiting for some competitor to come along and lop them off. Inside the testes, it's not just like an egg and hollow in there and fluid around it. There's all these tubules in there called the seminiferous tubules. We'll get to that in just a second. So it's filled up with these tubules called the seminiferous tubules. And then eventually the sperm that are being produced in the wall, the seminiferous tubule will make their way to the lumen and then swim out into this area of the tubule system or the ductal system of the male called the epididymis, which kind of hugs the testes. From the epididymis, semen and sperm will be ejected via the vas deferens or the ductus deferens, which moves up anterior to the pube, going around the back of the bladder and joins with the male urethra within the prostate gland and what we call the ejaculatory duct. You can also see that associated with the ejaculatory duct is a series of glands called the seminal vesicles, which produce about 60% of the volume of semen. Right? It's got a lot of, isotonic fluid in there with some nutrients and some enzymes and things like that to help and aid in the process of fertilization, which we'll talk about later on in the semester, like next week. Circling the urethra as it comes out of the bladder is the prostate gland of the male. A couple of different functions of the prostate gland that we'll get to in lecture. We also have a little gland here at the base of the penis called the bulbourethral gland. This is called Cowper's gland. Cowper's gland is what its old name was, but now we call it the bulbourethral gland. Then you have the penis itself, which is the copulatory organ of the male. The penis is made up of a variety of different tissues that can become engorged with blood to make it stiff and erect so you can gain access to the female anatomy. The end of the penis is an expanded region called the glans penis, which then is continuous with a tubular erectile tissue that surrounds the male urethra called the corpora spongiosum. The spongiosum allows the urethra to stay open during erection so it doesn't become compressed so you can actually ejaculate. And then you have the corpus cavernosum, which makes up pretty much most of the body of the dorsum of the penis itself. And so the male anatomy, pretty basic, simple, right? We've got this model here which depicts quite a bit of the male anatomy, pretty much all of it that you need to know, right? You've got your testes over here and the scrotum. Inside the testes, they cut it so the seminiferous tubules, and then they blew it up over here. So these are the seminiferous tubules inside. This is the epididymis, which then would become the vas deferens, which would loop around here and then join right here. So that's part of the vas deferens there. These are the seminal vesicles, prostate gland, the bulbourethral gland, and then the penis itself, right? The end is the gland. This also has the male bladder here as well, right? So that's our male models. For the female, we have same thing as the male, the pelvic cross section, but then we also have this model here, which depicts mostly the internal anatomy. We do have the beginning of or the end of the vagina, really. The vagina right here, and then the beginning of the uterus, right, with the cervix, and the body of the uterus, the fundus. You have the uterine tube or fallopian tube, which picks up the gamete from the ovary. The female's gamete is the ovary, and she keeps her ovary nice, protected in her pelvic cavity. So we can get a female anatomy here. So the sagittal section, the female's ovary is inside her pelvic cavity, protected. Her ductal system is not continuous with the gonad like in the male. In the male, when the sperm butt off the wall of the seminiferous tubule in the testes is a closed duct all the way outside of his body to the end of his urethra. Whereas in the female, her ovary sits in her peritoneal cavity, and her ductal system, the end of the fallopian tube, is this expanded region with these finger-like structures that sweep the surface of the ovary called fimbriae. And hopefully the the egg, which gets ovulated into her peritoneal cavity, gets picked up by the fallopian tube and then transported down to the uterus. We'll get a better look at how that's oriented in a second. Right? We can see the orientation of the female uterus with respect to her bladder, kind of posterior and superior to the bladder there. We can see the copulatory organ of the female, the vagina, which receives the male penis and then gamete. We begin the cervix there as the beginning of the uterus, which pokes kind of down into the vagina. And you have the body and the fundus. The wall of her uterus actually has three different basic layers. The lining of the uterus is called the endometrium, which is kind of a dynamic functional layer that we'll discuss in class. The middle layer is made up mostly of smooth muscle and connective tissue called the myometrium, and then the final outer layer is the perimetrium, which is basically the serosa, the visceral peritoneal part, right? So the frontal view of the female anatomy gives you a better orientation, right? So we have the vagina here, beginning of the uterus, the cervix, we have the external cervical os, the cervical canal, the internal os, the body. The top dome shape is called the fundus, just like the stomach, right? Then you have your uterine tubes. Now the ovary is connected to the uterus via the ligament, but that's not how the gamete gets there. It gets there through the fallopian tube. Kind of a pear-shaped organ, right? Now inside the uterus, though, we have several models that depict a variety of different stages of follicular development. And we'll discuss this in lecture, but this is one of our best models here that shows kind of all the different stages of follicular development. In the female, she begins the process of beginning to develop her gamete as a fetus, right? So she creates all these little tiny primordial follicles that contain a cell that's going to eventually develop into an egg. Right? So she makes all those when she's a fetus, and then they kind of go dormant for a while until she hits puberty. Then once she reaches puberty, about once every 28 days or so, one of the ovaries, one of the follicles, the primary follicles, begins to progress towards secondary vesicular ovulation and then corpus luteum. Right? So this model depicts all those stages, right? So you have these primary follicles are the tiniest little ones over here. Then the middle, intermediate sized ones would be secondary follicles, and the big ones are vesicular. They're ready for ovulation, right? Then we've got this one ovulating here, right? There's the egg right there that's spit out, obviously not the scale. And then once the follicle ruptures and ovulates the egg, the rest of the cells of the follicle condense to form a glandular structure called the corpus luteum, which produces hormones that maintains the female's body receptive for that pregnancy, but prevents further development of another follicle during her uterine and ovarian cycles. So then the corpus luteum hangs around and makes hormones if she gets pregnant for about 3 months, but if she doesn't, after about 2 weeks, it just stops making hormones and becomes the corpus albicans, which is just like a little star. Okay. So all the stages of follicular development here in this ovary. We also have this model, which kind of shows the previous picture with the uterus, the vagina, cervix, body, fundus, 3 different layers of the wall, ovary, fallopian tube with its fimbriae. And then you can also see follicular development in this one too. This is kind of really small. Okay, those are the reproductive structures and models that you must learn